listeners, and welcome to the Downright Upright Show, the place to go to hear out loud and proud what Minnesotans are thinking. And I am your host, Philip Anthony. I'm so excited that you have chosen to join us today, and I'm hoping you are all fantabulous. My special guest today is Eagan City Council member Mike Supina. Previously, Mr. Supina served on the Eagan Energy and Environment Advisory Commission, that's a mouthful, and the Eagan Advisory Planning Commission, as well as 2 Dakota County commissions. He is active in a number of local nonprofits, including the Open Door, Artworks, the Eastview Community Foundation, the Eagan Community Foundation, and Eagan Kickstart Rotary, which he served as president in 2019 through 2020. That's a mouthful there, too. Welcome,
Yeah.
City Council Member Supina, to the Downright Upright Show. May I call you Mike?
Mike is perfect. Thanks, Philip. I'm glad to be here.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for coming. And as I say to all guests, you know, you guys have such a busy schedule, and it's so nice that you take a little time out to come and speak to the listeners about what your plans are to help the people of this community. And so thank you for that.
Yeah, I'm happy to do it. That's part of my job.
Exactly,
Yeah.
yes. So like with all my guests, I like to know what their beginnings were, like, you know, where they came from, you know, their schooling, all of that. So where were you born and raised and went to school and all that fun stuff?
Well, I'll fill you in on all that. So born in New York City, which sounds very urban and like apartment buildings and skyscrapers. The part of New York City I was born in is as far south in New York as you can possibly get without being in New Jersey. So the area is called Tottenville. We kind of think of it as a town, even though New York
Beautiful
is
there.
one big city. It's kind of even isolated from the rest of Staten Island by some, you know, big areas, a big church property, and then some industry. So it really was a very backwater place when I was growing up there. Thinking of it now, it was almost a little bit like Appalachia, you know, old houses.
I remember Staten
Yeah.
Island back in the day, yeah.
The New York Daily News did a feature on it back in the 1970s, and they just showed like barefoot people sitting on their porch, and I mean they really made it look like it was from the middle of kind of you know, the Appalachian part of the United States. It's not like that anymore. The developers have discovered it, and there's a lot of really big homes, and they're buying up the small homes that are on small properties and putting, you know, knocking them down and putting multiple homes there. So it's a lot different now than when I was growing up. But
And the Verrazano Bridge had a lot to do with that.
Yes,
don't
yes,
you think?
it did.
Yeah,
That
'cause it
brought in a
connected
lot of
Brooklyn
it.
to Staten Island, and then there, I think there was the Outer Bridge and the
Goethals
Goethals,
Bridge,
which connected.
which had been there. They'd been there since
Oh,
the
they were? Okay.
30s or the 20s. In fact, the Goethals Bridge, they just built a replacement for it. The company that I used to work for, the engineering part of it, did that replacement. So that
What's
was
it
kind of
called
nice.
now?
It's still called the Goethals Bridge, but
Oh, it
it's
is? Okay.
a shiny new Goethals Bridge now.
Oh,
and
wow.
when we fly in to visit the family, we fly into Newark Airport, take the Goethals Bridge over, you know, to Staten Island and go visit them. So Tottenville was a very unique place back then. It was, I really liked growing up there. And it's different now, and there is a lot of nostalgia there for kind of the way it used to be, but I think that's true of a lot of places. High school, we went to Tottenville High School, which actually used to be in Tottenville. And then when I was kind of around 10 or so, they built the big new Tottenville High School a few miles outside of Tottenville, and the old Tottenville High School became a middle school. So I went there for middle school. Tottenville High School, which was a very big high school, probably close to 5,000 kids in it. And that's still there, thriving, going strong. And then went to college in Boston, you know, went to MIT for college. So after that, I pretty much didn't live in New York anymore. So if any of your listeners are wondering, hey, this guy says he grew up in New York, I don't hear a New York accent. Well, you know, that's what happens. You move out of New York, you lose your accent, right? So, except for you.
Do I have mine?
Yes, you do.
Okay.
You and Bernie Sanders are the only ones that have
but I
kept them.
talk like that.
Yeah, I know.
But no, but
when I imitate my dad, I can talk like that.
was the Staten Island ferry still around when you were there? Or?
Oh yeah, and still around now.
When you were born,
when I was
too?
a kid, it was a nickel. In fact, just today on Facebook, there's a page for like old Staten Island stuff, and they showed a picture of a guy putting up the sign where they were raising it to a dime in 1972.
Boy.
Yeah, expensive, and then it got up to like a quarter, and now I think actually now it's free. I think the city just decided it's not worth it to collect. Plus that's the only way a lot of commuters get into Manhattan, so they just said, never mind, we're just not going to charge anything for the ferry.
How cool.
So,
Did that happen recently? They changed that?
That it's been free? I think it's been free for a number of years now.
Because I've been in Minnesota about 22 years, so was it before that?
Probably around that time. I mean,
Okay.
we go back usually every year, at least once or twice, to visit family, and sometimes when we do that, we'll take a day away from visiting family and go into the city and go to a museum or something. So yeah, we'll take the train and the ferry and all that. So
Yeah. Staten Island has some really nice beaches too. I remember going there when I was a really young kid to Staten Island.
Yes, it used to have the
beach.
The parts closer to Brooklyn, there were in fact, a long time ago, before my time, it was kind of a beach community. People would have little bungalows and go there for their summer beach, like the way people do now down at the Jersey Shore. They would go to Staten Island. And down where we were, all the way at the end, there was a big oyster industry in Tottenville. And that went away when New York Harbor became very polluted. And now that they've done a good job cleaning up the harbor, it's coming back. They've seeded oyster beds around, because oysters actually do help clean up the water too. So, and it's starting to, I don't think it'll be an industry like the way it used to be, but oysters are starting to, move back into those waters. So.
Oh, that's awesome. So just like you, I also grew up in New York, and I'm just curious, because I can give you my answer, but it'd probably be a little bit different than yours. What was the biggest adjustment for you going from New York, and then I think Boston you lived for a little while as well, those northeastern states to coming to the Midwest, to Minnesota?
Right. And actually, between Boston and here, we were in California for 6 years, and then moved here.
Well, California
in the Bay
is
Area.
more like New York than less than Minnesota. Yeah.
Yes. So biggest adjustment, well, there's a few of them. In California, where we were right before here, most of the people I knew weren't from there. Right. A lot of them were from other places. Right. Because it was, especially back in the late 80s, early 90s, it was just a place where everybody was moving to. So everybody was kind of like me.
Was this when you went to Berkeley?
Yes, this is grad school.
Yeah, well, that was a great school. I
Yes.
think it still is one of the top-notch schools in the country, isn't it?
It's an awesome school. And in fact, my oldest daughter went there for her grad school, too. She's finished now. And my wife was there for grad school. So it's kind of become a family, and my cousin. So it's sort of a family thing to go out there and go to grad school, even though none of us are from California originally. But yeah, everybody was from somewhere else, right? So you're like, where are you from? Where are you from? Minnesota's not like that. When I moved here, most of the people I met were
natives.
from here. And not only were they from here, but a lot of them were like even grew up, I grew up on a farm out in wherever, someplace
Up
out.
north or
down
south.
And so people seem a lot closer to like the original like family origins of when their families first came here. And so it was easy to feel more like an outsider when you come here because, you don't know the culture, and Minnesota does have a distinct culture, so you're not familiar with that. People tend to know each other more because they all grew up here together. A lot of folks have their cabin. So, all of a sudden in the summertime, I would walk outside and be, where'd all my neighbors go? Because they're all up north at their cabin or wherever their cabin is. So there's a culture there that we were not really that familiar with. And so I'm sure it wasn't by intent, but it's easy as an outsider to feel like an outsider, because you're not part of that. I've lived here 30 years now. My wife and I have lived here 30 years and raised our family here, so we don't feel like that anymore. My kids all grew up in Minnesota and all of their Minnesota accents, so sometimes we make fun of them for that. And they make fun of us.
I love my favorite part of their accent. It's not the "ya" and all that. My favorite thing is, and like my husband has this thing too. Any words that have an AG in it, like bag, they used a long A instead of a, which is bag or bag
Flag.
or flag. Agnes, the name. How's Agnes doing? I think it's cute.
That's funny that you say that, because that is one of the first things
Yeah.
I noticed. I was working, and there was one of my coworkers was talking about, I don't know, a night out that he had on the weekend, and he said, "Oh, and then I staggered home." And I'm like, "You what?" "Oh, I staggered home." I'm like, "Oh, I now I understand what you're saying." It's like you almost need the little translator to be like,
You go shopping with my husband. Yeah, he's hilarious. He'll go, look, I would say, like, how much is this, do you think, Bjorn? He goes, well, look at the tag. It's on the tag. Oh, okay, it's on the tag.
Yes, so
but
yes,
anyway,
we did notice
that's
that
a
as
big
well.
one for me, yeah. But anyway, yeah, mine was kind of the same. I was probably a little more, I had a little more of an accent maybe than you did, because maybe it was diluted when you lived in California, because they're like totally awesome. You gagged me with a spoon, very
my accent pretty
valley,
much.
yeah.
I don't know. I guess I'm like a chameleon, because it pretty much went away.
Did you ever say coffee?
Oh, I said all of that. Yeah.
You ever say
all of that?
All of that,
Yeah,
and talking
so
and walking.
The only
right?
words I got left, orange. So,
Yeah.
so I say that,
Sometimes
and then
I say it
people
comes out.
at
Yeah.
work would be like, "Wait, what was that?" And it's like orange. Is that, I brought an orange from home. They're like,
Yeah.
"Oh, and you mean like an orange?" I'm like,
orange.
"Oh, yeah, that's like the one word I have left that, it's like, let me cling on to that, please."
We have a ton of words. I mean, there are things I come out with that people like, and I have to realize, oh, I'm not in New York anymore, Anyway, so I know you received your BS degree, bachelor's degree, from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and your Master of Architecture from the University of California, Berkeley.
Yes, sir.
So did you ever go into practice as an architect, and did you enjoy doing that? Do you miss it, or
Yes.
explain to the listeners?
I've worked for many years as an architect until about 5 years ago, and not as not my own firm. I've worked for other firms in California, I guess not really in Massachusetts, because that's when I was in college, but in California and then here. Do I miss it? In some ways, I'd say yes. I worked on almost every type of building that there is. So a lot of government buildings, healthcare, industrial, retail, multifamily housing. I guess the only kind I haven't really done is single-family housing, but then we put an addition on our house, so I got to check that box off too, because we did I designed our addition to our house back in 2007, 2008. I would say there is kind of a theme to the work that I've done. Pretty much everything I've done, except for maybe the retail and industrial, has gravitated in some way or another towards multifamily housing and affordable housing. So I did a lot of senior housing. Even when I was doing government work, I did military housing. So a big barracks building in Oklahoma and another big one out in Colorado, which I'm really proud of both of those, especially one in Colorado, because the housing that existed there before, which is still there, was not really in great shape. And of course, when you do this kind of thing, you go out and visit and see what else is there. And I felt like it is one of those things that really gives you a sense of accomplishment when you're done, and you say, well, now they have this great new, military housing, new facility, and maybe eventually they can get rid of those really bad ones, and and continue replacing those. So that was a
Well, you
good
also
feeling.
brought up, excuse me for interrupting, you brought up about affordable housing.
Yes.
So did you work for HUD?
No.
you-
One of the places I worked for here in Minnesota did work with local CDAs, community development agencies, and those there's one right here in Dakota County, but the ones that we worked for were up in northern Minnesota. So we did
I see.
some
Okay.
apartment buildings up there, affordable housing.
There's a lot of
up
need
there.
for affordable housing
Yes.
now, especially now with everything so, everything's skyrocketing.
Everything market rate is just very hard now, especially for young people and young families, and even just people that don't have, okay, so here, back to Staten Island. We lived next door to my grandparents. My grandpa just had a series of, he was a milkman, he was a school bus driver, he worked in the hardware store up in town. None of these are high-paying professional jobs. My grandmother didn't work outside the house. They raised 3 kids, and they had some foster kids, and they owned a house. They occasionally would buy, I don't think they ever bought a new car, but they would occasionally replace their car and buy another car. And, they definitely weren't wealthy, but they owned a house. And can someone do that today?
Yeah,
can
that's a good
you
point.
have a household with one wage earner who's basically earning, not professional wages, and another person who isn't earning anything, and then live in a house that you own and raise 3 kids? I don't think that's possible. So something has changed, right? Housing has become a commodity. It's no longer kind of an expectation. Well, of course you're going to, buy a house and raise your family there, So it's become such a commodity that people can't afford it anymore. So how do we fix that? And as far as the market rate goes, I don't think there's a way to fix it. So that's why all the affordable housing you see being developed now is through community development agencies and other ways where there's a public input. Or
The government
subsidy.
has to do it.
Yes,
that's
exactly
what you're trying to
And
say.
then- and
because
then there's a
without the government doing it,
Right.
nobody's going to make money on public housing. They
Right,
don't
and then
make
there's a
money
big
on
fight
that.
about that, because then it becomes a party issue, right? A political issue. It's like, well, why are we giving money to them? The
Them.
whole them thing,
Yeah, the
which
whole
I'm
them
sure we'll
thing.
get into later. But
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
kind of one of the other big issues that we run into.
You know,
So,
why that them thing is just the Republicans are really capitalizing on that. The word them.
Yeah.
They are coming across the border. They want to indoctrinate your children. They want to do. It's just scare tactics.
Yeah.
And it boils my blood sometimes when I think about it. Anyway, so as a city council member, can you tell the listeners what your top priorities are?
oh, for sure.
As an advocate for the people of Egan, because people don't. I'm gonna full disclosure. I can even tell you, I have no idea what you do as a city council member. I know what the president does. I know what the vice president does. I know what a senator does, because those are things that are out there, and people see it on TV, read it in the paper. But as a city council member, that's a job that a lot of people would need to know what the actual day-to-day functions are.
Well,
and
go ahead.
so expand on that for the listeners.
Oh, absolutely. So we do just a little bit less than the president does. So it's almost the same, really.
Less than the president does. Okay.
I'm kidding. Okay.
I know you are.
We do a lot less than the president. And of course, it depends on what kind of city you are. But the way Egan is set up, the council, it's not a full-time job. We do get paid, not very much. And in fact, I don't even remember exactly what it is, but I believe it's $10,000 a year. So it's more or less a stipend. And the mandatory parts of it are essentially going to city council meetings and preparing for the city council meetings. And everything beyond that is kind of what you make of it. So and maybe because I'm a new guy, I do all the stuff. So there are League of Minnesota Cities, for example. Egan belongs to the League of Minnesota Cities. They have policy committees, and they ask people to join their policy committees and help them develop policy. So I joined a policy committee. Metro Cities, which is another lobbying group for metro area cities, Egan belongs to that. I'm on a policy committee for them. That's not mandatory. You don't have to do it. They have 3 meetings every summer, and I go to those because I think as part of my job, I should be helping develop policy for what cities want. And just fun things like new restaurant in Egan, Kitchen and Rail, that opened about a month ago, 2 months ago, something like that. The chamber is like, hey, who wants to come to the ribbon cutting? I'm like, I do, because, first of all, Yeah, restaurant? Sure, I'll go in there. And then, so you show up, and it's good to have a representative of the city at something
Sure,
like that. And I'll tell you, as a fellow Italian American, I walked in the door. There's a crowd of people there for this ribbon cutting. I walked in the door. As soon as I walked in, it smelled exactly like my Nana's sauce. So, and I just blurted that out to the first person I saw who I didn't even know. I was like, this smells just like my Nana's kitchen. 15 minutes later, when they were doing the ribbon cutting, they said, "Oh, and Mike's here from the city council. Mike, do you want to say a few words?" And I was like, you know what? When I walked in the door, I thought it smelled just like my Nana's kitchen. And boy, did that owner of that place smile, because he was just like, that's exactly
what
he's going for.
Yeah,
so home cooking, right?
And so, and to add to that, what are the priority? I love that word. Priorities that you, as a city council member, have. In other words, what's the top of your bucket list right now?
Well, what I'm happy to say is that the top of my bucket list now is still pretty much aligns with what it was when I was a candidate. So, it's funny because when you're a candidate and you're not exactly sure what you're getting into, you kind of say, well, this is what I want to do. And, maybe you get elected and find out, oh, well, why did I say that? That's dumb. But no, it actually still aligns. And the top priorities for me are sustainability is a big one. And as you mentioned, I was on the Energy Environment Commission before I became a council member. And that we also had kind of subcommittees where we were pushing for things like green step cities or, water quality or kind of, more recycling and composting at city parks, things like that. Solar energy ordinance, that kind of stuff. So now that I'm on the council, I can help enact some of those things that I was advocating for 3-4 years ago when I was on Energy Environment Commission. So that's a big one, and there are some developments coming up in that maybe we'll get to. Another big one is equity and inclusion. I think it's important that the city's staff and the city's elected officials and cities' advisory commissions are more reflective of our city as a whole, and they're not right now. I mean, it's not subjective. They are very objectively not reflective of the city as a whole, and there's all kinds of reasons for that. And some of that we can do stuff about, some of it we can't. But the one thing we can do something about is outreach. So the city, I know, is active in outreach, especially I'll focus on our advisory commissions, which we have, I think, 4 of right now. I might be getting that wrong. The city does outreach and says, hey, we want to get lots of people to apply for these advisory commissions, so we have a good pool of people to choose from, and also as diverse a pool as we can get. And then in addition to that, I go out on my own when I meet people around Egan that I have an interest in a certain topic. I'll say, I hope you apply for our advisory commission, planning or parks or energy and environment. Once the application period comes up, which is, by the way, I think in March. The next one is coming up in March of 2023. So if any of your listeners want to help influence policy in Egan, they should keep their eyes open and apply for an advisory commission.
Is it only Egan, or all the other cities have the same?
They have their own, as far
dates?
as I know. But yeah, the only ones that I'm
part
of are the ones in Egan. Yes,
right, of course.
Yes, yeah. But every city, I think, has a handful of.
Is it around March of all the cities have it around that time, or
that I couldn't tell you? But Egan's is the application period is in March. We do our appointments, I think, in either April or May, something like that.
Okay.
The last couple times since I've been on the council, the number of applicants and the number of open spaces has been nearly equal, which is good because you don't have to say no to anybody. But it's bad because you don't have a bigger pool of people to choose from, So it'd be great to have more applicants, even if that means some of them don't get chosen their first time around. When I was applying for the Planning Commission way back in before 2009, I wasn't appointed to the Planning Commission until my 3rd try. So maybe we had more applicants back then, or maybe I was the bottom of the barrel. I don't know, but somehow I did eventually get on it. I was on the Planning Commission for 5 years. I had to resign because one thing you didn't mention in your bio is because we moved to Sweden for a year. So I actually got to live over there
Wow, you
for a
really
year.
are a vagabond.
World traveler.
World traveler.
That was for my wife's work.
Yeah.
She had a 2-year assignment
I
there.
went there just
Yeah.
this year, actually.
Wasn't it awesome?
Loved it. Loved
So
it.
did you go all around or mostly Stockholm or?
Well, Sweden, mostly Stockholm.
Yeah,
Norway, the whole country, up and
Yeah,
down.
and I didn't get very much in Norway. We did travel while we were there. We tried to take advantage and travel as much as we could around there during school breaks because two of my kids were in school there, a year of public school there in Sweden. So good for them. My youngest is essentially fluent in Swedish now, which is great.
Oh, that's
My
nice.
oldest did his senior year of high school there. By then, all the kids over there all know English. So he was like, nah, I'll just talk to them in English. So I think he can understand Swedish, but he didn't really speak it too much. So.
Well, I also remember that you said on the campaign trail that you were proposing to add a human rights commission to advise the city council. And I, as a gay man, felt that that was very encouraging, and that was a big bonus. I mean, when people say, they're in for inclusion, I'm all in. Has that goal been met? And if not, what roadblocks are you finding in the way?
Well, the goal hasn't been met, but I wouldn't say there are roadblocks yet either. It's just it's a multi-step process. See, this is one of those things you learn once you get elected, is that the council just doesn't snap their fingers and say, hey, let's start a new commission to join the Planning Commission and Energy and Environment and Parks. We'll start Human Rights Commission is one term for it, Equity Commission. The idea that I had when I was campaigning as a candidate was that any major policy shifts or changes that the city was considering would kind of pass through this commission. So the commission could say, hey, let's put on our equity lens and see if we make this change or this policy difference or whatever it is it going to, how will that affect, the equity landscape in Egan? So that was the idea. Once I was a council member, we talked about that at our first workshop. I think we're having the 1 o'clock siren outside.
Yeah,
I hope it doesn't get picked up by your mics. But
Probably.
we talked about that at the first workshop we were at, and I of course brought that up because it was a priority for me and not just for me. Other council members understood the need to. Mm-hmm. And what we decided to do was to hire a consultant to look at the entire kind of race, equity, inclusion, diversity landscape of not just city government, but even just everybody that the city interacts with. So even, the community as a whole, mm-hmm. but focusing on city government because that's what we can do the most about.
Right.
And we did hire that consultant earlier this year in 2022. So they have about a year of work that's going to include interviewing lots of people in the city government, including us. They already interviewed all of us council members, including me, about a month ago. Folks out in the community. They have a few stages that they're working through, and then next, I might be getting the dates wrong, but I believe it's next summer of 2023, they'll kind of deliver their recommendations of what they think we should be doing, if anything, what we should be doing different. I hope there will be things that
right.
they recommend that we do differently. In fact, the interviews were all kind of, closed door kind of interviews because they want people to be very honest and frank in them. So I won't kind of repeat all the things we talked about in the interview. But one thing I did say, which I'll talk about here, is that I told them, in my opinion, once they deliver those or formulate those recommendations for us, don't make things easy on us. If we get a list of recommendations that's easy to do, mm-hmm. I'll feel like I'll be disappointed because I'll feel like, well, we could have done this ourselves. I want
right.
you to, make it hard for us, and maybe there's things we'll feel like we can't do, or maybe there'll be people who feel like politically they can't do certain things. But whatever it is, I want it to be challenging for us, not easy for us. So
Well, good
we'll
for
see
you.
what we get next year. But so long answer to your question, no, we don't have a new Human Rights Commission. That maybe will be part of their recommendations. I couldn't tell you because they're still working on that. Maybe they'll say, hey, there's another way, another means you can accomplish your goals other than a commission. You know, to me, the idea was, yeah, let's do it with a commission. Maybe it'll be something else. So these consultants are very much experts in this field. When I came out of my interview with them, I felt really comfortable that we hired the right people. So I'm kind of excited to see what they're going to come up with next year.
So maybe when you come on the next show.
Yes. A year from now.
No, I hope you come sooner than that, actually. But I didn't mean it that way.
But I'll be able to
You'll have
report
better
back.
news. Yeah, you can report back and let us know how that's working out. And because, diversity is, I mean, every company now is promoting that because we're not a monolith anymore. This country is, back in the day, in the 40s and 50s, everybody was like, you watch TV, everybody was white and, there was all heterosexual couples on TV, Ozzie and Harriet, and then the 70s came around, and then you saw Good Times, you saw black families, and you saw, the Cosby Show. You started seeing black families, and then there were Latinos on TV, and then you had gay shows like Will and Grace came in the 90s. So we've become a more diverse country.
And it's funny that you say it in terms of TV because
I look at it because I think TV reflects a lot about what's going on in current times.
Well, there are shows that occasionally we'll see on TV that are like, say, in a high school, and there's gay kids, and in this TV show, all kinds of kids in this high school, and I'm always fascinated when I watch those shows because, as I told you, my high school had almost 5,000 kids in it, and at the time, I could not have named a single kid who was gay in my high school because it was just not something people
I had
talked
the reputation, but I didn't come out actually because nobody did.
Because it was something nobody talked. Well, you were in high school around the same time I was. It was just not talked about.
Just got beat up if you did.
Yeah, which was one of the few blessings of Facebook. Is you go on Facebook and reconnect with your old high school friends after 30 years, and you're like, oh, that kid was gay, because now they're adults and they've come out.
Yeah,
and
you got to. That's funny you bring that up because I've gotten friend requests from people that I went to high school with and grammar school and now they call it elementary school.
Yeah.
And some of them are gay.
Yeah.
And they were the ones that were like the tough kids. Some of them, they were. I guess they were hiding their real feelings, and they did a good job. Some of them, I was like, oh wow, shocking.
Yeah.
In your opinion, what is one of the greatest accomplishments that the city council has achieved while you were there? So, if you were to pick. If you want to do two, it's fine. It's whatever you
Good,
feel like.
because I was going to say two.
Oh, you were going to do two. Okay, there you
one
go.
of them's an easy one because it's the one I just told you about, hiring this consultant to work on our diversity, and equity environment.
Yeah.
So I won't.
And that was one of your campaign promises that you would
Yes.
do that. And you did.
So I'm being a little self-serving because I'm going to name things that were priorities to me when I was a candidate, which is okay because I think that's what I'm also have learned since being elected is that it's not like I came onto the council and like stamped my foot and said, these are the things that I want you all to do now. I mean, these are things that everybody on the council, I think, had an inclination for
Anyway. Right.
Or in some way, and just different degrees, of course, but in some way or another. But sometimes when you have the new person come on who was elected specifically after saying, these are the things that are important to me, you kind of take a step back and go, oh, okay, well, they were kind of important to me too, but now that I see that, 16,000 whatever people voted for this person, who very clearly said this is what they wanted to do, then maybe that makes them even a little bit more inclined towards that, and it, and also staff and everyone else in the city says, okay, it's kind of clear this is where the city wants to go as a community of 68,000 people. Let's kind of move the barge or the Queen Elizabeth or whatever in that direction. They say turning, if they want to stop the ocean liner, it takes 7 miles or whatever, because it's the same thing with cities. Egan's a little maybe more nimble than most, but turning that ship in the direction you want to go, it's not something you
But
do
Egan is,
on a dime.
full disclosure, Egan is one of the biggest cities in the Twin Cities. I mean,
think
it's
we're
not
about
it's not like Lilydale or
maybe
anything.
12th or 13th. Unfortunately, we lost a spot because Lakeville just passed us in population after the last.
Lakeville?
Yeah.
No.
But you're not saying that. You're not
No,
saying
I'm not
that.
saying
You're
it-
saying that in a
nice way.
Yeah, of course
No,
you
but
are.
I would never have. I would have thought you would have said Bloomington or Richfield or.
I don't know if Bloomington's still growing, but Lakeville is definitely growing,
'Cause I
and
love
there's
Lake-
lots of
no,
room
no,
to grow.
Thank you for clearing that up. I love Lakeville,
Yeah.
but I would have never thought Lakeville
Yeah.
because Lakeville is so. I still consider it like. Anyway,
Almost
when I
an
moved
exurb,
here,
almost.
Yes,
Yes.
I thought of it as an exterior ringed suburb. Not even part of the Twin Cities. And now it's considered part of the Twin Cities. But I think at one point it wasn't even part of the Twin Cities.
Yeah, I
and
don't
now
know.
it's got more population than Egan. You're saying?
Yes, sir. And
Wow.
I'll tell you.
See,
I
that's
know we're
something
talking about
that my
Egan.
listeners just learned. You see.
So we're talking about Egan, but I'll tell you a quick detour about Lakeville. And I don't know a whole lot about Lakeville, so I'm not the
I
Lakeville
love
expert
Lakeville.
here.
It's so pretty there.
But when I was last summer and a couple summers ago, I was volunteering with the Open Door, and they have a program called Mobile Lunchbox. So and it's a way to get lunches to kids in the summertime when the schools aren't serving lunch, of course, because the schools are closed. So they cooperate with local school districts, and you put a bunch of food in a van and drive to different areas in the southern metro and drop these lunches off for kids, deliver these lunches to kids. And we had a lot of stops in Lakeville. And I remember the first time I was doing it, I thought, Lakeville? That's just like a bunch of single-family home tracts. Why are we bringing it to Lakeville? Well, that's not all of what Lakeville is. There are, just like every other city in the metro, there are pockets of poverty in Lakeville. Mobile home parks, at
Right.
least 3 that we visited, and maybe I don't know if there's others, but there's 3 that we visited, and apartment buildings. And it was a surprise to me, and I learned a lot because, this one mobile home park, we drove past this big shopping center, and then there's a road, and then a gravel road, and then you're in the middle of this forest, and then suddenly there's hundreds of mobile homes around you, and all these kids running out to get lunch, and I'm like, where did I just go through like some kind of portal or one of those science fiction shows? Like, how did I get to this place? I was just right out on that main road and the big shiny moving theater and the restaurants but yeah, it's everywhere.
I have
including in
I have a
Lakeville.
great same thing with me. I remember. Do you remember when the Democrats had their primaries? They were running against each other, so it was like Pete Buttigieg against Beto O'Rourke, against Biden, against Kamala Harris, and a whole bunch of them. Well, Beto O'Rourke had come to the Twin Cities to campaign, and he had an event in a brewery in Lakeville.
Oh.
And a bunch of my friends got together because I always found him fascinating. The way he speaks, it's just like he's captive. He's got this way of drawing you in. I don't know if you've
He needs to move to a state that'll elect him to something.
Thank you. I think he keeps
Like here.
He keeps losing because he's in like. I don't want to bash Texans because I'm sure there's Texans listening out there that are very nice, but God, Anyway, but he came here and he went to a brewery and you could barely fit in there. It was like this, it was a big space, but it was like full of people and there were lines around the block to meet him and take pictures and stuff. But I remember driving through this town and there was so much going on.
Yeah.
You wouldn't think like you go to Lakeville for a brewery. Like they had craft beers and they had spike cider and it was very like the room was just, the space was just very overwhelmingly industrial, kind of with the pipes, stuff. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, this is really, really cool, and because I don't think of it that way.
Well, once you move people into a place, businesses and amenities and often kind of cool gathering places
Yeah.
follow, and sometimes a little bit behind that is maybe more cultural institutions follow. So like here in Eagan, Artworks, which is our local arts nonprofit, one of our local arts nonprofits. We have several, Capone
Right.
Art Park being another. That started up because we hit a critical mass of people, and for arts exhibits and things like that, and performances, people were going to Minneapolis and St. Paul, and we're like, we could do that here.
Yeah.
You don't have to go there. Okay, I'm going to backtrack because you asked me what I thought the city council's best accomplishment was, and I started talking about Lakeville. So let me go back to the accomplishment.
We went off on a tangerine.
We did. We went off on exactly. So, but I do want to talk about the accomplishment because it's kind of important to me, which is one of the priorities I had was sustainability when I was a candidate, and we talked about that when I was on the Energy and Environment Commission, because the way Eagan did sustainability at that time is we did not have a full-time sustainability coordinator. So our director of parks, Andrew Pimentel, I want to make sure I pronounce his name right, he kind of took on that role, even though he had multiple other hats that he was wearing. So he knew, and we knew, that it would be much better if we had somebody who would do that job solely by themselves. And one of the things that we've worked on in the last year is developed a plan to hire a full-time sustainability coordinator, which will probably happen sometime. I don't think it's going to happen in 2022, but it might happen early 2023. I don't have the dates exactly right, so forgive me for that, but sometime in the next 6 months or whatever, this person will probably be coming on board. And we're funding it with a franchise fee on everybody's electric bill. So it's a fee, it's not a tax, but yes, it's more money that everybody's paying. I think it's something to the tune of maybe $1 a month. I don't know, something like that. So you might see it on your bill, and if you don't like it, I'm the person one of the 5 people you can complain to about it. But the thing is, for that $1 a month or whatever that is that everybody's paying and businesses are paying, we're getting someone who can coordinate all among multiple departments in the city our sustainability efforts. So it's not just kind of like a hodgepodge patchwork of what is happening in each department. We have one person who's kind of knows the big picture. So I think it's well worth the money. So yes, I was
for $1. I mean, come on, Mike.
Yeah.
I mean, that's.
And I'm estimating, so I might be getting the number a little bit wrong, but it's essentially a negligible amount.
Yeah,
so
it sounds like a good
and we're getting
idea.
a good value for it.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
that, I would say, is what I'm most proud of. I guess until that person's actually on board, it still has to be tentative, but I'm sure that person will be on board pretty soon, and we can kind of check that box and be like,
Awesome.
yes, that's something that was a priority for me, and now we have it. So
Wonderful. Well, thanks for telling us that. And before we get to the shift, there's part of the show where we talk about other things.
Okay.
Do you have, this is a personal question, I always wanted to ask you this. Do you have any ambitions to run for higher office in the county or in the state at large? So right now you're a city council member. I'm not going to poo-poo that. That's a great job, and you do great work. No, I'm serious. I
agree.
always say this to people.
wouldn't poo-poo it.
That when look at our governor. He started as a rep.
Yeah.
A state rep, wasn't he? A state rep, I think he was, or a state senator. I'm confused now.
He was a. No, I'm going to mess up.
I think he
was
was-
our member of Congress, wasn't he?
I think he was a
He was
state-
the member of Congress down in District 1.
But the point I'm making
before
is-
that, before that, he probably. I don't
Probably
know what he was before.
He probably
but
went
I'm-
up the ladder, but
yes.
he started
He
somewhere.
started as a school teacher.
Yes.
So there you go.
So look where
That's
he
kind of
is now.
Even more important to me is that let's get some teachers.
Oh yeah, very smart man.
few more
Very
of them.
smart man.
Yeah.
That's what to me. It's
Yeah.
you got a doctor who doesn't believe in vaccines. I mean, and running against a teacher. I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, but So do you have any ambitions?
Ambitions, I'd say no. I had been thinking of running for city council actually for many years, and I'm a very patient person, I like to think. So even though I kind of started thinking about this, 20 years ago, maybe, I kind of need things to be, I was like, okay, are the kids in the right place? And is it going to take too much time from this? And how's my work going? And then luckily I didn't run before we went to Sweden, because I would have had to quit and go to Sweden. So once we got back from Sweden, I was like, okay, this is something I've been thinking about for a long time. I'm going to do this. And I had a few folks encouraging me. One person, approached me early in 2016 and said, are you thinking of running? And I said, yeah, I'm thinking about it. And then he approached me a little bit later and said, well, think a little harder, because you need to make a decision, because, otherwise, I might look for someone else, to encourage to run. And I was like, okay, give me a little more time, I'll think about it. And I did think about it and decided to take the plunge. And, if you've never run for anything before, that's a big step to take, because if you're going to do it seriously. So it's easy to it costs $5 to file. So it's easy to pay your $5 and put your name in there and never do anything, and you won't get elected. So there's not a whole lot of point in that, in my opinion. But if you're going to take it seriously, it's a big undertaking. You are knocking on doors and calling people and getting out of your comfort zone. And it may be hard for you to realize this during this interview, but I am not an extrovert, and when it was time for me to actually start going to people and talking about myself a lot, that was not at all in my comfort zone. So I did run in 2016. Wasn't elected in 2016, but I got a lot of votes, and I think a lot of people were like, oh, this guy actually, took it seriously and worked his butt off. And if he ever does it again, he might win. And then I did run in 2020 and won.
I'm going to make a prediction.
Yeah. What's that?
I'm going to be Kreskin right now. Well, the older people know who Kreskin is. What's her name? That other psychic, the Long Island madam.
I don't remember her name now.
I'm going to say...
I'm going to Google it while you're talking. No, I won't.
When a door opens up for a position in a higher office, I bet you would take it, because I'm just going to say that because you're a very friendly guy. You're very ambitious, I think. You're doing a wonderful job at what you do. You're friendly as all heck. I mean, I remember the first time I met you at a campaign event. You and I just... It was like I met you like 25 years.
It's like someone from my hometown,
Hey, Joey. Hey. Well, yeah. So it's kind of. I'm just saying, I'm not trying to blow smoke in your face or anything. Yeah. But I just think you would be fabulous if you kept in this zone, in the political zone. Yeah. And if anything opens up and somebody approaches you, I really encourage you to try doing it.
And I'm open to it. I'm not thrilled with partisan office right now, open disclosure, I align with the DFL, so I don't know, probably everybody figured that out by now, but I do. And DFL's great, and we have a bunch of great elected officials and candidates. When I see the difference between running for partisan office compared to what I did, it's night and day. I mean, hundreds of thousands of dollars being spent, horrible pictures and things being said about you. And you don't want to have to be scared off by that stuff.
Especially how vicious it's getting nowadays.
But you also think, why would I put myself through that? So the people that do put themselves through that, I have the greatest respect for, because I have a hard time picturing myself doing that. Who knows? I may be able to do that someday. I couldn't say, but I have a hard time picturing myself doing that. What I am more excited about and hoping that I can accomplish is creating, I don't know if the word bench sounds almost creating a bench. It sounds a little bit maybe like I want to have a pipeline of folks that are willing to serve, partisan or not on partisan office, doesn't matter. And I want that pipeline to be, as we said earlier, more reflective of the general population in Eagan. So in any way I can, every time I meet folks, especially women, especially people of color, people from the LGBTQ community, and they seem to have an interest in what's happening in the city or what's happening in elected office, I try to find ways to encourage them to get their foot in the door. And it doesn't always mean run for something right away. It might mean apply for an advisory commission, or it might mean join the Rotary Club, where you
Right.
kind of make connections, and that then if you do decide you're going to run for something or whatever, you have a base of people who know you
Right.
and can vouch for you, which is word of mouth
And I'll
is
vouch for
still
you.
the most important, thing that you can do. So yeah, sure, maybe I'll run for something else, different office. I don't know.
I hope so.
But what I really want to do is get that pipeline so that it doesn't matter if I run for something else
Right.
or not,
I
because
know what
we
you're
have all
saying.
these other
Yeah.
people that can do that.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. Listen,
Yeah.
yeah, and that's how I feel about this podcast too.
Yeah.
When I do it, I have a pipeline of people that listen,
Yeah.
and have told other people about it, and I try to explain, in easy to understand language what I really want to accomplish. I believe in equality for all. There's certain things I just really, really fight for. Equality for all. I believe in democracy. That's my big one now. Democracy is a huge one, and I think that's on the ballot this year. So anyway.
Good segue to your next segment of your show.
Exactly.
So-
And now we've come to the part of the show I like to call the shift, where I shift the questioning away from your job as city council member of Eagan to your opinions on current affairs. Is that okay?
Yes,
All right,
for
so
sure.
as of the taping of this show, the Daily Beast and subsequently other news outlets reported that Republican candidate for governor Herschel Walker paid for an abortion for an ex-girlfriend. I don't know if you heard that.
I did.
And he has been out on the campaign trail saying that he is against abortion in all cases. His ex-girlfriend even has the receipts from the abortion provider and the get well card and the check that was in the card. She has that too. She's got everything. How hypocritical is that? And why do you suppose that even with this news, the polls may not be really shifting dramatically? So in other words, you're you saying, I believe that abortion should be outlawed completely because it's wrong and it's this and that, whatever
So
the
you're saying
reason.
what he's saying. Yeah.
And now we find out that he literally paid a woman
Sure.
to have one.
And he's not the first person that elected official or prominent person who's done this exact same thing. I know there was I believe either a member of Congress or a state representative in Tennessee, I think it was a member of Congress, did the exact same thing. And as far as this woman and the abortion that she got, my opinion on that is that's her business. And,
Oh yeah, I'm not saying
yes,
that.
of course.
Yeah, I mean, I think she has every
yeah.
right in the world to have
Yeah.
an abortion if she wants one.
That's
That's why choice is so important.
The focus isn't on that so much as is on the hypocrisy, and the
Yes.
hypocrisy is
Yes.
in all manner of issues.
Yes.
Abortion being one of a multitude of issues where that hypocrisy.
So how can you?
exists.
My point
Yes.
is though. This is it, Mike.
Yes.
This is my point. How can you trust someone who says, "I don't like this," but they do it?
Right.
For example, I don't like chocolate ice cream. And then you see a picture of them eating chocolate ice cream. I mean, how
Yeah.
can you believe that person that representing you?
Yeah.
And you want to have trust in that person. So I don't understand how people could still look at him and go, yeah, he's my guy. You know?
And there's been plenty
You
of
know?
other examples. You know that there were plenty of political folks, elected officials, who would run on the platform of being against gay rights.
Yes.
And then of course, turns out they're gay, or at least, secretly, if that's the right word, closeted gay. So again, if they're gay, fine, but don't be a hypocrite and go out and try and get votes from people by telling them how much you're against gay rights, because you're
other words, you're
not.
trying to-
That's what you.
Yes,
that's what you
and you're
are.
trying to get the bigot vote.
And the same thing with Herschel Walker is the hypocrisy. And kind of the bigger
Yes.
question or the follow up was why would people still vote for him
Yes.
after this? And that is, of course, the million-dollar mystery question.
Yeah.
And the answer I have, which is maybe not a great answer, but it's the one that works for me, is this whole idea of tribalism, right?
Yeah.
So at this point,
Sure.
it has nothing to do with policy. It has nothing to do with whether what he paid for or didn't pay for, or what he says on the campaign trail or what he doesn't say on the campaign trail. He could say nothing. He could have said nothing for this whole campaign and never left his house, and he'd probably still get 45% of the vote, at least, maybe more, because of tribalism. People are just like, oh, he's the guy that I'm supposed to vote for
because he's
in
R
my
next to
party.
Yeah.
And no doubt there's some of that on the Democratic side too.
But
I tend to see more of it on the Republican side, and maybe that's
Yes.
just because of the perspective I'm looking from. But it just seems like the outrages, for instance, in this Herschel Walker case, are so much more vivid on the Republican side, and the fact that someone would just and I heard someone literally said this to me. This was, I think, right before Trump was elected. I was talking to somebody about it who was a Republican, and he was telling me how much he what a bad candidate he thought Trump was, and that he thought he was kind of not qualified to be president, all that. And then he said he was going to vote for him. And I'm like, why? And he's like, well, because I'm a Republican, and he's, so it had nothing to do with qualifications, what the person's proposing to do, what the person's, how they communicate, whether they seem, rational or not. It has to do with their brand. So tribalism has kind of become the top issue, more so than any abortion or the environment or anything else. That's the top issue.
I agree. The next few topics, we'll have to go through them quickly because we're starting to run out of some time here. As of the taping of this show as well, the U.S. Senate is trying to pass a bipartisan bill to amend the Electoral Count Act of 1887. Can you tell our listeners why passing that bill is vital to preserving the smooth transfer of power from one president to another?
Well, sure. And the only reason I think it's vital is because somebody tried to sabotage it a couple of years ago. So I would not have even been able to tell you anything about the Electoral College Act.
I didn't even know about it
2 years ago. But once you realize, okay, there's all of these kind of technical steps that happen until the electors get chosen and vote for the president. And until 2 years ago, we thought those were all just kind of like procedural steps. Well, now we know that at every single one of those steps, if someone tries really hard, they can throw a roadblock in there, or a crowbar, or whatever kind of
term you want to use,
impediment you want to use. They can throw it in there and make a problem.
Well, that's why they wanted to hang Mike Pence, because they said Mike Pence is going by the Constitution and saying, well, this is just a ceremonial job. I'm just supposed to be there. You bring me the votes, you count them, you told me who won, and then we say this is who we're going to give those electors to. He couldn't turn around and say, you know what, I don't agree with those electors, because the state picked the electors.
Yes, because suddenly it's the vice president's role to choose who our next president is. It's like, no.
Not really.
But the thing is, so now that we know that all of these things are subject to sabotage, we say, well, sure, people are trying to sabotage it, but they'll never get away with it because this is how it's always been done. Well, if you can appoint enough judges that see things your way, your sabotage will succeed because people will appeal to your judges. And this is maybe something else we're going to be talking about if there's time, I don't know. But, now the judges aren't impartial judges anymore. Now judges are just basically another element of the tribal
whole other
political
program.
system.
That's a whole other show, because I'll tell you, when I saw that they overturned Roe versus Wade, and what was the precedent? There was two. There was another. It always escapes me that one.
Yeah, I'm gonna.
Well, anyway, it's a double precedent.
Yeah.
Roe versus Wade, and then they upheld it in the 90s again.
Yeah.
You cannot make this stuff up. I mean, normally double precedent is etched in the law. That's it. Now, one Supreme Court, because you decide to change the content of the Supreme Court, who the people are, you're gonna say, you know what? Those two courts that decided differently, nah, we don't believe them, and we'll just do what we want. That shows you how political the Supreme Court
the
is.
Supreme Court has basically been transformed.
Yeah.
It's not a court anymore. It's
No.
an unelected third house of the government, except it's one that's not elected and also one that can overrule anything else that anybody else decides, any law that anybody decides. And it's, in my opinion, it's kind of out of
dangerous.
control now and
Very dangerous.
unfettered, unleashed, and nothing can stop them. People are like, public opinion is against this, but they're ruling for it anyway. Do you think the Supreme Court cares? They're like, what do we care? We're in here for life. We can do whatever we want.
And you have Clarence Thomas, his wife is just like, they have text messages that she wanted to go through with the whole insurrection deal.
Yes.
And now he's going to be ruling on things having to do with Trump's documents that they found in Mar-a-Lago. This is what I mean.
Well, he already did rule once on those text messages. It was an 8-1 ruling about whether they should be disclosed, and he was the only one ruling against it. I wonder why.
Yeah, hello. Yeah. Anyway, moving on to Minnesota politics.
Okay.
In your opinion, as a Minnesota resident, what are some of the most important issues on the ballot in our state this coming November? So we have a lot of things that we're going to be voting for.
Well, one important one is, we have all these kids in school going to like potty and litter boxes. That's kind of important, isn't it? You haven't heard this, have you? The look on your face shows me you haven't heard this. So, okay, I'll get into it.
No, you're kidding me.
No, it's not happening.
First,
it's not happening. But yes, maybe it's April 1st. There is an internet hoax going around that says, hey, kids are identifying as animals and not as people anymore, and now schools are putting litter boxes out for them to use. This is an internet hoax, listeners, not a real thing. To most of us,
I never.
It
heard
is
that
a
in
real
my
thing.
life.
It is a real thing to the Republican candidate for governor, Scott Jensen.
He put this out
spoke
there?
to a group, one of his rallies
totally
or whatever,
kidding me.
and he basically read word for word this internet hoax and said, look what those guys are doing. They're making our kids go to the bathroom in litter boxes in school. So
Mike.
he took it hook, line, and
Mike,
sinker.
I'm getting nauseous right now, please.
Hook, line, and sinker, and he's repeating this at his campaign events. Maybe he's not anymore now because it's been exposed,
God.
but he repeated it at a campaign event. So sorry to disappoint you there, Philip, but I won't say that's the biggest issue as far as litter boxes go, but I'm going to say it's a big issue in that, again, even after that, he is probably going to get at least 40% of the vote.
Yeah,
There's
you're right.
40% of your friends and neighbors, maybe not your friends, 40% of your neighbors are going to vote for him and say, yeah, he's the guy I want to be governor. And I don't care that he came out and said children are going to school in litter box, going to bathroom and litter boxes in school, and fell for this internet thing.
Is this a QAnon thing, or this is just something he conjured up?
No, he didn't conjure it up. This is something that somebody put out.
He pulled this out of some
and this is a common
dark
thing.
web thing.
They find things on the internet that support what they already believe, and just repeat them with no checking whatsoever. And because they know the people they're repeating them to also want to believe it.
Right.
So it's this kind of horrible cycle that exists, and
like Ron DeSantis when he did the Don't Say Gay bill. I mean, that was something that was probably in the dark echelon of the internet as well, where you can come in as a child, first grade, second grade, have two fathers, two mothers, a mother, a father, whatever, and they say, today we're going to draw our family. Yeah. And then you have two daddies or two
except
mommies.
for you can't draw yours.
Now, you can't draw yours because that would upset some parents. So we'll let you go home today, or you'll be
draw your friend's family
you from this class. I mean, that's better.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't get this stuff, but anyway, moving on. Finally, as you know, I am a gay man who is worried about attacks on the LGBT community by the likes of Ron DeSantis and others, like I just mentioned, on our civil rights. In your opinion, what can be done to make sure that gay, bi, trans people experience less discrimination in schools, in housing, in adoption, in marrying who they want, et cetera. So, for example, and not that this is going to be part of what I want personally, but again, we live in a diverse country. There are LGBT people that may want to adopt or may want to, live in a certain area of the country where it's, we don't want you there. So if I want to adopt a kid, let's say, and I live in the Bible Belt, I am still living in the USA, believe it or not. Why do you think it's important that we address these issues now before these rights are stripped away?
Yeah, well, it's critically important because we've known for a while, but we've learned especially in the last year that court rulings even Supreme Court rulings aren't permanent, right?
Well, we just found that out.
Yes, yeah. So yes, there was a Supreme Court ruling not too many years ago that said, of course, gay people can marry one another.
5 to 4.
5 to 4.
Barely.
Yes. But it's almost ridiculous that even has to be something that a court rules on, right? But it was, and it was a 5 to 4 ruling. I guarantee you, if that same ruling were made by today's Supreme Court,
oh God, no,
it would not be a 5 to 4 ruling, and it's only a matter of time.
Has society fallen apart because I married my husband?
Yeah.
I mean, I really don't understand why people are involved in other people's business, Mike. It's very, it kind of boggles the mind.
So there's two ways to kind of help create the security that your family's looking for and that a lot of gay families looking for. One of them is to codify these court rulings into law, which isn't
like
probably going to happen in a lot of states, but it can happen in places like Minnesota, possibly anyway. Maybe not right now because we have a split legislature. But
if we keep it blue, yes.
Yeah. So that's one way is the legal way. The second way is maybe harder to describe, but probably far more effective, which is people just have to get to know. I mean, people often, not always, but often don't discriminate against folks that they know. I mean, you live in the middle of a neighborhood here in Eagan. I don't know your relationship with your neighbors, but I would bet your neighbors don't walk by your house every day and say to you, you shouldn't be married to your husband.
No.
Right? Because they know you.
Yes.
Right? People who don't know
and they're very nice to me.
Yes,
I have
of course.
to say, they're very nice to me. They don't.
Yeah.
I don't know what they say behind my back, but as far as in front of my face, they're very nice to me.
Yes,
and
but people who
kind
don't know you and who are, for example, running for governor maybe or something else, they feel like they can say whatever they want because they're not talking to someone they know. They're just talking out into the void, saying, "Here's how I feel." Once you actually meet folks and know folks and say, "Oh, this isn't the boogeyman. This isn't going to destroy society. This is normal." I have
two people that love each other.
Yeah, I have a cousin, an older cousin who was a teacher at my high school when I was there, and after I graduated, she came out as gay and married. I don't know, not married, but because it wasn't legal at the time.
Yeah, it wasn't legal.
But had a partner, and they lived together. 30. Essentially since right after I graduated high school, 30 years? I don't know how many years, until her partner passed away, which of course devastated her. And, I look at that and say, so those two people couldn't get married. They're at the time, they could have, under today's environment, but they couldn't at the time. But, they were together much longer than many married couples are and had a closer bond than most married couples do. And they couldn't be married. That somehow society looks at that relationship as being lesser somehow, which is simply unfair and also just plain wrong. So yeah, the two things are legal avenue and people just have to start to get to know folks. And once they do, they're like, oh, okay, this is cool.
Yeah.
This is normal.
Yeah, thanks for that, Mike.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, I'm sad. We have come to the end of the show today. Is there anything you wanted to finish with at all? I don't want to leave you hanging if I didn't. If you didn't bring up something.
I think we hit all the topics that
Good. Okay.
I wanted to talk about.
I always do that. I make sure that everything is out there and our listeners get the full scope of what you came here to.
This was a lot of fun. I'm kind of going over in my head at everything we talked about. And I was like, nope, I don't. There's nothing there that I feel like I should have said differently. So I feel okay about it.
You did a great job. Thank you so much for doing this. And for more about Eagan City Council member Mike Supina, you can follow him on Facebook at Supina, the numeral 4 Eagan. So it's Supina, the numeral 4 EAGAN. And on Twitter at the same thing, Supina for Eagan with the number 4. And thanks so much for coming today to the Downright Upright show. And will you come again maybe in the future? We'll
absolutely
do this again and maybe have a panel show and get a few of our politicians and local politicians.
Like have a big argument?
No. No. We're not going to bring Marjorie Taylor Greene here, are we? No.
I don't know. That might be kind of fun, actually.
Oh, you would like that, would you? No, I don't think so. Anyway, and to our listeners, we'd like to thank you for spending time with us today, and please stay tuned for more of the Downright Upright show in the future. And this is your host, Philip Anthony, saying ciao for now. Bye, Mike. Thank you.